March 28, 1938, Vienna. The printing presses of the Völkischer Beobachter are running at maximum speed. This isn't just another edition of the Nazi Party's chief newspaper. This one is designed to be a psychological atom bomb. When the paper hits the stands, the front page leaves the public breathless. Printed right there is an official letter on the majestic letterhead of the Catholic Church. But it's not the official text that makes people stop dead in the streets. It's what is written at the very bottom, right beneath the heavy, sacred seal of the Cardinal. 2 words, written in the Cardinal's very own handwriting: Heil, Hitler. Within 24 hours, Nazi propaganda offices across Austria reproduce this exact signature. They blow it up, print it onto thousands of massive posters, and plaster them on church doors, grocery stores, and alleyways. The psychological warfare is perfect. The message to the public is devastatingly simple. If the ultimate authority of God in Austria has bowed to the Führer, who are you to resist? Even the Catholic Church blesses the swastika. This is the story of Cardinal Theodor Innitzer, a man who thought he could play chess with the devil to protect his institution, a man who went from signing Nazi loyalty oaths to being hunted through the corridors of his own palace by a bloodthirsty mob of Hitler youth in just 7 months. To understand how the most powerful churchman in Austria ended up writing those 2 words, we have to look at the man himself and the toxic trap that was laid for him years before. Theodor Innitzer was not a radical. He was a bureaucrat. Born on Christmas Day in 1875 in the Bohemian foothills, he rose through the ranks of the Austrian Church with quiet, scholarly, mathematical precision. He wasn't a street fighter. He was a man of the institution. By 1932, he was appointed Archbishop of Vienna. Just 1 year later, Pope Pius XI raised him to cardinal, placing him at the absolute apex of Austrian Catholicism. But Innitzer assumed power at the worst possible moment in European history. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler had just consolidated total power, and the Vatican, terrified of a brutal crackdown on German Catholics, decided to make a defensive move. In July 1933, the Vatican signed a historic treaty with Nazi Germany, the Reichskonkordat. It was a classic devil's bargain. The treaty guaranteed that the Nazis would leave Catholic schools, sacraments, and youth groups alone. In exchange, the Vatican agreed to a devastating clause. Catholic bishops were required to swear an oath of loyalty to the Reich, and clergy were strictly banned from any political activity. Historians still argue that this single treaty gave Hitler the international legitimacy he desperately needed when his regime was still fragile. It sent a signal to the world that the Vatican was willing to do business with fascism. Innitzer inherited this broken framework. He truly believed that the only way to save the Church from total annihilation was absolute pragmatic accommodation. But what started as institutional self-defense quickly spiraled into active, humiliating collaboration. Flash forward to March 12, 1938. German tanks and troops cross the border. The Anschluss begins. Austria is swallowed by Nazi Germany overnight, while thousands of citizens flee in terror and political dissidents are dragged to the early basements of the Gestapo. Cardinal Innitzer makes a choice. He does not protest. He doesn't call for calm. Instead, he opens the doors of his palace to the invaders. On March 18th, Innitzer convenes the Austrian bishops. Together, they draft a Feierliche Erklärung, a solemn declaration endorsing the Nazi annexation. Innitzer doesn't just sign it. He orders this pastoral letter to be read aloud from every single pulpit across the country. He commands Austrian Catholics, as a religious duty, to vote Ja in the upcoming plebiscite, to legally integrate Austria into the Third Reich. The text praised the new order and explicitly thanked divine providence for the bloodless transition. But Innitzer wanted to ensure the new rulers knew exactly where he stood. He wrote a private cover letter to the brutal Nazi Gauleiter Josef Bürkel to hand-deliver the document. And at the bottom of that letter, to prove his absolute compliance, he picks up his pen and writes, Heil Hitler. 4 days later, he writes another letter to German Cardinal Adolf Bertram, coordinating the pro-Nazi voting campaign. He closes that one too in his own handwriting, Und Heil Hitler. When the election happens on April 10th, the regime reports a staggering, mathematically absurd 99.73% in favor of the Reich. Joseph Goebbels, the mastermind of Nazi propaganda, notes in his diaries how incredibly valuable Innitzer's public surrender was. But on the streets of Vienna, ordinary Catholics are in shock. They look at the posters of their cardinal's signature paraded next to Hitler's portrait, and they feel a profound, sickening sense of betrayal. And across the Alps, inside the walls of the Vatican, Pope Pius XI is reading the exact same newspapers. He is absolutely furious. The Vatican's reaction is lightning fast. On April 2nd, the Pope orders the official Vatican newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano, to publish a highly unusual unsigned front-page notice. It completely disavows the Austrian bishops. The Vatican states bluntly that Innitzer's declaration was never submitted to Rome for approval, and the Pope does not authorize its content. The international press explodes. Catholic newspapers in France, Britain, and America openly attack Innitzer. How could a prince of the Holy Roman Church give a holy blessing to a regime built on pagan racial laws, concentration camps, and political terror? By October 1938, the Pope has had enough. Innitzer is summoned to Rome. The meetings behind closed doors are brutal. The dying Pope Pius XI and his brilliant Secretary of State, Eugenio Pacelli, humiliate Innitzer. They demand that he sign a complete public retraction. He is given an ultimatum: fix the damage or face total ruin. Innitzer returns to Vienna a broken man. He realizes that his strategy of kissing the boots of the regime bought him nothing but international disgrace. He decides to pivot. On October 7, 1938, over 10,000 Catholic youths gather inside and around St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. The air is thick with tension. The Gestapo is everywhere in the crowd, watching, listening. Innitzer walks up to the pulpit. He looks out at the young faces who feel abandoned by their leaders. And this time, he doesn't preach accommodation. He doesn't mention the Führer. Instead, his voice echoes through the stone arches with a terrifying clarity. There is only one Führer, Jesus Christ. The crowd gasps, then erupts. It is an act of open defiance. Innitzer goes on to state that no one can be a sincere Catholic and a true National Socialist at the same time. The wording completely erases the diplomatic gray zones of March. It is a declaration of spiritual war. For the Nazi regime, this isn't a theological debate. It's a public insult by the man whose Heil Hitler they had used to conquer Austria. And the revenge takes less than 24 hours. On the evening of October 8th, a highly organized mob of over 100 Hitler Youth and SS men in civilian clothes gather outside Innitzer's Archbishop's Palace on Rotenturmstrasse. They start chanting death threats. Then, the stones start flying. Windows shatter. The mob storms the heavy wooden doors, smashing them open with axes and crowbars. They surge through the holy corridors like a flash flood. They ransack the historic rooms, ripping priceless paintings from the walls and throwing antique furniture out of the windows into the courtyard below. They are hunting for Innitzer. A young priest, Father Johannes Krawarik, tries to block their path. The mob grabs him, beats him, and literally hurls him out of a second-story window onto the stone pavement below, leaving him permanently crippled. Innitzer is forced to flee into the deep, dark inner corridors of his palace as the mob closes in, shouting his name. Outside, the Vienna police arrive with agonizing slowness. They stand by, crossing their arms, watching the destruction happen, refusing to intervene. The message from the regime is delivered in blood and shattered glass. The exact same cardinal who had signed Heil Hitler in March was now hiding in his own palace while Nazi thugs destroyed his life. His entire adult life had been spent protecting the institution through compromise. Now his palace lay in splinters. The illusion was dead. Collaboration had bought him zero protection. If a cardinal could be assaulted in broad daylight while the state police watched and smiled, then no priest, no parish, and no regular citizen was safe. The following month, on November 9th, the horrific pogroms of Kristallnacht sweep through Vienna. Synagogues are burned, and Jewish citizens are slaughtered in the streets. Something inside Innitzer finally breaks. For the remainder of the war, the cardinal completely shifts his operation. He stops trying to please Berlin. Instead, he turns his damaged palace into a secret underground network, hiding and saving hundreds of persecuted Jews, converts, and political targets from the clutches of the Gestapo. Innitzer survived the war and died on October 9, 1955. Today, historians still fiercely debate his legacy. Was he a coward who enabled the rise of a monster, or a tragic pragmatist trapped in an impossible historical vice? His life represents the ultimate deadly calculus facing leaders under totalitarian rule. Do you bow to the tyrant to ensure your institutional survival, or do you stand on principle and watch everything you love get destroyed? But here's the most chilling part of the story. The legal trap that boxed Innitzer in? It never truly went away. The Reichskonkordat, the very treaty from 1933 that politically disarmed the church and forced bishops to swear oaths to Hitler, remains formally in force in the Federal Republic of Germany today. It still governs massive aspects of church-state relations, church taxes, and constitutional laws across Germany. The ghost of 1938 is still quietly sitting in the modern legal architecture of Europe, waiting for the next great crisis to test it. One signature, 2 words, a handwritten Heil Hitler beneath a sacred cardinal's seal. A betrayal that backfired in the most violent way imaginable. Innitzer thought he could control the tiger by riding it. He learned the hard way that totalitarian regimes don't want partners, they want victims. But while Innitzer chose the path of dangerous compromise, other men of the cloth looked at the same regime, faced the same terrifying pressure, and made the exact opposite choice.